most vulnerable, most impacted group of people that were joining us, and they're on their way, some young students, and they're in recess, and they're trying to get out of recess, I guess. So, thank you for your patience. We will get started. Is everybody ready? Sound check. All right, perfect. My name is Jaylani Hussain. I am the Executive Director for CAIR Minnesota. Name is JAYLANIHUSSEIN. CAIR Minnesota could be CAIR-MN. Today we are gathered this morning at this press conference with Minnesotans who come from all different backgrounds, different faith traditions, here today to release a report on the anti-Muslim movement here in Minnesota, particularly one of the areas that we have not had the opportunity or the coverage on the complexities and the money, the financiers of the anti-Muslim movement in the state. Islamophobia, the anti-Muslim movement today, is no different than the anti-Catholic movement in this country, the anti-Jewish movement in this country, and the anti-religion and other group movements in this country. In fact, every single thing, every single strategy that is outlined in this report, that is outlined in the anti-Muslim movement's report, is the exact same strategy that was done against other communities. Today, my community lives in fear. Our children live in fear of bullying. Our families live in fear. Our mosques and our places of worship are attacked every single day. We here at CAIR Minnesota hear the few brave individuals who bring up to us their cases of anti-Muslim bigotry. This past year alone, we lost a young person to bullying, which we know came from anti-Muslim bullying. Last year we had a mosque bomb. This year alone, 3 mosques have been vandalized, and maybe even others who have not reported. Our community is impacted greatly every single day. Just this past a week ago, I was threatened. My office, my staff, my team have been threatened on social media that we have now the FBI looking into. This is real. This report means that the individuals behind these organizations are manipulating the masses in Minnesota to turn against their neighbors, to turn against their doctors, to turn against their friends because of this false information that they aim to drive policies behind. So today we are releasing this report with the support of many organizations, as you will see in the report, and many other organizations who have not yet actually been put on the report, but who are also standing with us today to remind Minnesota and this state that the Muslim community has its allies. And the Muslim community's allies are everybody, all Minnesotans. The report highlights, obviously, not only the financiers, but individuals who are prominent behind the scenes, using media, using their money and their leverage in both Fortune 500 companies. We also talk about the different aspects, including the story that was aired on Fox 9 earlier this year that has been wrapped in every anti-Muslim blog in the state. It is repeated over and over and over. It is the talking point for the campaign for politicians today. It is that type of rumors, that type of lies that are threatening the lives of our community today. And so we're asking for all Minnesotans to recognize, in order to build inclusivity, to build a better Minnesota for all of us, it needs to start with being not fooled by the anti-Muslim movement today, who are in dark shadows with money, who are using blogs and news outlets to distort the facts and the truth behind. Muslims in this country have been part of the framing of this country. We have been here from the inception. Muslims have been here. Even in Minnesota, Muslims date back to 1800s. And today, we have a new population of Muslims. Yet, Islam is not new in America. And so with that, I want to now invite a few individuals who will briefly talk to the report as well as the background to that. First, I'd like to invite Reverend Leanne Watkins.
Again, my name is the Reverend Leanne Watkins. That's L-E-E-A-N-N-E, Watkins, W-A-T-K-I-N-S. I'm standing here. I'm a priest in the Episcopal Church. I serve a congregation in St. Paul called St. Mary's. But today I'm standing with ISIAH, which is a coalition of faith-based organizations, Muslim, Christian, Jewish, and others, coming together around common values that we hold dear, values of love and values of inclusion, and values of respect for the dignity of every human being. This is something we hold in common. We believe that this respect was given to us by our Creator, that we were created in love to love, and our task is to love. Our task is therefore to be a repairer of the breach. And so we call attention to this report today because it is unraveling our job. It is going counter to our values of being loving repairers of that breach. It is sowing fear. It is sowing hate. And what we have to say is that we stand on the side of love. We believe that all people are worth dignity and respect. We believe in a Minnesota where you are welcome and you are safe, regardless of the color of your skin, to whom you pray, if you pray, where you live, where you were born, how much money you have, a pre-existing condition you have. You are worth love and safety, dignity and respect. And this is a Minnesota value that people of faith share. So pay attention to this report because it goes against this idea of our task to repair the breach. We do this through love, and we believe that ultimately love is stronger than any fear. And we as people of faith are wise to this. So we stand on the side of love. We stand on the side of reparation. Love is stronger. Thank you.
And now, as most of us know, St. Cloud is one of the regions that has had a great deal of tension and incidents there, and today we're glad to have one of our champions in that area from UniteCloud, Natalie Ringsmith.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Jaylani and CAIR Minnesota for the tireless work that you do to ensure that everyone, including our Muslim neighbors, are welcome in Minnesota. And thank you to the media who are here covering this important press conference. My name is Natalie Ringsmuth, N-A-T-A-L-I-E. Ringsmuth, R-I-N-G-S-M-U-T-H, and I'm the director of UniteCloud. We are a St. Cloud area nonprofit working to reduce religious, cultural, and racial tensions in central Minnesota. The issue of Islamophobia, like Jaylani said, is extremely real in central Minnesota. In the last 3 years, I have attended countless events and meetings where speakers purport that one day all Muslims will rise up and behead your children and grandchildren. When my Muslim friends participate in community meetings or walk into community spaces, they are interrupted with demands to show us your tax returns right now, or are told if you are a real American, you would take off your hijab. It is easy to think that this is just a few silly people, and I've been told by many people that the best thing to do about racism and Islamophobia is to ignore it. But no, we cannot be indifferent about the suffering of our neighbor. As the key findings we are presenting here states, those who consume anti-Muslim propaganda are not crazy, stupid, or bigoted. They make rational decisions about the world in which they live. Like most of us, they live in a world created by the media they consume. In a world created by this propaganda, preemptive violence towards Muslims is not only defensible and necessary to them, it is rational. We have seen this play out when my friend Ozma was physically assaulted while eating dinner at Applebee's in Coon Rapids. In St. Cloud, someone tried to run down an elderly Somali woman with their truck, and a neighbor harassed Somali children, yes, children, calling them the N-word and telling them to get the hell out of Minnesota. We also had a cab driver choked while simply driving because he was assumed to be Muslim. This is the reality of what fear of the other has done, not only to our great state of Minnesota, but to our nation. There are many people who are fighting back with love and light, but we need more people to join us. To close my part of this press conference, I would like to quote from the movie A Wrinkle in Time that my 9-year-old daughter and I were watching this weekend. You see, this is what it does. One person at a time until fear takes over. Fear turns to rage. Rage leads to violence, and then there's a tipping point. If we do not act soon, darkness will fall across the universe. So we're asking you to be a light, the Minnesota community to be a light in this present darkness of Islamophobia. Be like the St. Cloud community member who put her van in between the truck I mentioned earlier, and the elderly Somali woman thanked her for it. Be like the person in the cab who called 911 when her friend was choking the cab driver because she did not want anything to do with his Islamophobic behavior. Be like my daughter Lauren, who, when she saw her classmate's hijab being ripped off, she stood up and said, "No, stop. You can't do this to my friend." Thank you.
And now I would like to also invite one of community members, Hassan Shira.
Hi, my name is Hassan Shira, and I'm talking for Muslim youth and workers. I live this country about 15 years. I grew up in here in Minnesota. I went to middle school and high school. And since I work now, we're having a lot of issues of working. And the head of that and all the problems of that is because of Islamophobia. And the problems we have of that is hiring, number one, that people, when they see us, they don't hire us because of Islamophobia, and they don't believe us. So I'm telling that communities, companies, we are part of Minnesota. We live here, we grow up here, so trust us. And the issue of when they hire us is they don't give us what we need for it. And so the rest of the people, like, they don't give us the space to pray. They don't give us the women rights for their hijab. And all those problems is because of the Islamophobia. So as a Muslim worker, what we need is to believe us as Minnesota, as the rest of the others Minnesotans living here. Thank you.
Before our final speaker, I wanted to add 2 points that I missed earlier. In our analysis of the impact of the Islamophobia on the Muslim community, we have realized that there's both externalized fear, the fear that something could happen, the fear that, and then the internalized. And so this year, we will be conducting a survey of Muslim youth across the state of Minnesota. I have come across a large number of Muslim youth where I've asked them, have you been bullied at school? And most of them would say no, but then when I ask them, have they been their hijab removed, have they been called terrorists or other things, they would say yes. And that's because they have actually internalized Islamophobia to a degree where they don't even see those things as a problem. The other thing we are extremely concerned about is the attack on Muslim women. In fact, majority of the incidents that have occurred here in Minnesota have been on women because of their immediate appearance of their hijab. That's why, as we learn more about the investigation of the 2 young women who died this weekend in Chaska, there are concerns from the community, as we have, that it's possible that they may have been driven off the road. That's something we want the police to be able to clarify or to look deeply into, because that is a pattern that we have seen. My wife has been driven off the road. Other people have reported this is a very common, that when somebody easily identifies Muslim women, that would be the action. So this is, and going back a little bit more details on this report, I want to also emphasize that right now in the state of Minnesota, it is a small group of people who are creating this fear. In fact, right now, one of the politicians who's running for governor has repeated statements about refugee resettlement, which is, we believe, a code word for Somalis. For most people in greater Minnesota, that is a code word for anti-Muslim rhetoric. With that said, we have our final speaker, and we're going to try to get him his statement. He just came from recess. So just, just say your name and then we'll make it good. Stand to the side.
Yusuf, and I am 10 years old. I am a 5th grade student at Success Academy at Dar Farouk. This is also the mosque that my family and I go to pray. A year ago, my mosque was bombed. When I heard that this happened, and I saw all the smoky blackness in the damaged room, I was very sad. I thought that this was a very evil act. I thought that the people who did this must have had some misunderstandings that made them mad and afraid, and because of their fear, they thought that was the only way to express their feelings. Fear and anger must not make us say and do bad things. Me and my classmates learn in school from our teachers and at home from our moms and dads that we must treat one another with kindness and respect, even if we disagree. Adults should know these things too. In Islam, we worship God and know that God loves all of us because He created all of us. To be Minnesotan means to treat each other with kindness and respect each other. Minnesotans help one another and do not harm one another. Just like I've learned at home, in school, and at my mosque, it is better to do things together. Talking to people with different opinions, race, and religion will help us all come to better solutions. Thank you for listening.
That concludes our press conference, and now we're available to answer questions about the report or anything else I can say.
Jelani, have you reached out to these organizations, these nonprofits, the Freedom Club and have you actually called and said, that's really the information that you're posting online is blah, blah, blah?
They are the same organizations that are already attacking my organization and any other organization.
So there's not a phone call to be made to try to reach out?
These people know us, and we also know them. So if they're willing to change their hearts and minds about their stance, we'd be more than happy to. But they have been doing this work from a shadowy standpoint. We are an organization, our community, if somebody feels that they are unfairly categorized in this report and wants to amend, we'd be more than happy to have those conversations and address it. But these individuals know exactly what they're doing, they know what they're doing, and they know the impact that it will have.
And your point is that if they post information on their blogs or online operation, then that information gets propagated and other media outlets use that as though it's credible and legitimate.
Absolutely.
And then it spreads like
And
wildfire.
mostly it's the public. The public are seeking information. Most people across the United States would still today identify they have little or no understanding about Islam and Muslims. And when with the rise of global terrorism, many of the other things, it creates the sense where people are giving bad information and Minnesotans are acting upon that bad information. And we see that on every single social media account of every single major story about Muslims. You can just, it's not even that hard. And you would see them talking points one by one, and they usually come from these organizations who are supporting that work.
Why release this report today? What's behind the timing? How much is
We actually
election?
we have been trying to finish the report for a while. So that there, obviously we've noticed this year, particularly in 2018, the election cycle has completely otherized Muslims. One party is bashing Muslims, another party is avoiding Muslims. That's usually the case. So the issue today Minnesotans are talking about is refugee resettlement. What does that mean? That is the state-sponsored process of the Muslim ban that President Trump put together in 2016, and the Supreme Court agreed with him. That the state version is to stop refugee resettlement. In fact, the governor cannot do it. It's not possible. And the reality that the Minnesota now is rich with immigrants, that's not the case. Most people in Minnesota, outside of the enforced African American slaves and the Native Americans who have been here, everybody else came here. In fact, if you go back in the 1920s, almost 30% of the population in Minnesota would identify themselves as immigrants, and their first language would not be English. So, the people who today who are saying stop refugee resettlements, their grandparents would, or their great-grandparents would be immigrants themselves. In fact, if you look at the state demographers, immigrants are the lifeline of Minnesota's economy. And our state, as it gets an aging state that is losing a part of its population, needs immigrants to sustain its economy and to thrive. immigrants are not all working at factories. In fact, immigrants are some of the people who are leading our Fortune 500 companies here in Minnesota. They're also the same people who are creating products and other things to make our state very viable. So, however, the fear politics of 2018 are really leading false information to be legitimized by the community, and the people who are behind it need to be exposed.
So calling out a governor candidate, what do you hope?
We hope
happen
people
on-
to be called to the truth. I mean, this information is not information we have gathered on our own. This is not conspiracy theory. Everything that is in there is very clear. It's fact, information that has been, that could be sourced, and we'd be more than happy to have a dialogue with anybody. In fact, we've invited both governors' candidates to meet with the Muslim community. One has, the other one, we still don't have a meeting.
Which one?
Jeff Johnson.
Has that met with you?
We sent him an email requesting to meet with some of the community leaders, and he still has yet to respond.
Jaylani,
We responded, but no meeting.
Sorry. When you mentioned in the report that you're kind of calling for the public condemnation of this type of the language that's being used, are there any things in particular that are you asking folks to take direct action, whether it be demonstrating, protesting, boycotting some of the Fortune 500 companies whose leaders have their names attached to these? What are some of the things that you'd like people to do?
Well, first, we want people to understand that this idea of bad information is not coming from just some Russian operative somewhere. Well, yeah, the Russian operatives are obviously using some of this information as well, but it's coming from people from here. In fact, we want to expose the players behind who are financing this work. I think for a period of time we've talked about the anti-Muslim traveling circuit and much of the small organizations, but we haven't talked about the dark money behind it. For example, Brad Anderson funded an organization that created ISIS videos, and his response initially was he didn't know they created those videos. But the organization itself is an anti-Muslim organization, regardless of what video that they created or not.
What organization is it?
I can't think of American Experiment,
Oh,
American something.
Oh, Freedom Club, one of those two.
No, this Brad was another organization. It's another national organization that he funded. But these organizations are the organizations today that people are using. Individuals who are listed in these groups are who state leaders are also listening to without maybe knowing that who they are. So, for example, Raheel Islam, I think she actually spoke to state legislators earlier this year after we had talked to the person who invited her. State Representative Ross Peterson invited her. We asked her to disinvite her. She did not. And then we asked her to follow up by hosting an event where we would provide information to the state representative. She denied us that access. So this is really impacting our community because these people are not just talking to the main public, but they're also speaking directly to state officials and leaders who will make decisions based on these false and bad information.
In your analysis, were you able to see, were you tracking the actual time? Do you think that in 2018 that, because some of these organizations, they've been around for a long time,
Absolutely.
these blogs, so
Absolutely.
do you feel like that they're getting more traction or they're putting out more information now?
Absolutely, and all of the content is really being centered around the anti-Muslim stuff. That's what we're seeing. The focus is now shifting toward that. It started to shift in 2016 election, and now it's doubling down in 2018 elections. That's why the topic of refugee resettlement is a huge topic, but it's really just a Minnesota nice way of saying we don't want Muslims here. Let's be, unfortunately, very frank about that. Yes.
I was wondering if you could say a bit more about how the flow of money is involved here, and specifically about the financing aspect of this.
So in the report, you see the different organizations, and obviously, if you're a VP at any of these companies, you got a lot of money to spare. But also some of for example, I think the Freedom Club, we're talking about some of the more elite folks who would be in process to that. I don't know how much, but this report, I think, is alluding to a lot of the dark money, which we know is extremely difficult to find because of the nature of using third parties to fund some of these organizations. So that donor advised funds and other ways of where that money would go. But this is a beginning. We actually have several other reports that we will be hopefully as we move forward to talk about that is impacting Islamophobia. And so this is just the beginning, and we we believe it's a good report that will provide, at least for the first time in Minnesota, to know who are the players behind some of this anti-Muslim rhetoric that we're seeing today. Some of the talking points that politicians are using, some of this stuff is coming from some of these organizations.
Jelani, real quick, have you seen examples of, when you see some of these talking points arise through some of the blogs and these sites, have you seen them filter up to where Minnesota politicians have started adopting some of that language and pushing for?
Absolutely.
Are there any particular ones that you think of off the top of your head?
Well, the refugee resettlement, I mean, that topic itself, so there's an anti-Muslim speaker from St. Cloud whose entire presentation is refugee resettlement. And that immediately grew and became a talking point in St. Cloud, where a city council member then started to say he wants to stop refugee resettlement. And then all of a sudden now we have a governor candidate who's talking about that. We have other candidates who are speaking about that. And we know what they're talking about. It's it's a refugee resettlement. It's not even immigration. And that refugee resettlement code has always been attacked and labeled and coined in the anti-Muslim movement in the state of Minnesota. So, you could split the hair and, you can do a lot of that, but this is exactly what talking about. In fact, our network at CAIR, all of our 35 chapters, we usually would go to an event and we have about 12 questions asked. And every of those 12 questions are the exact same questions that appear all over the United States. And that's coming from these groups who say, ask these questions. In fact, some of the people who ask them, you can't even do a follow-up with them because they don't have anything else to talk about other than that question that they framed out. And even the threat against me, this is that group that is starting to become, I believe, more radicalized. I have not seen them this aggressive. At the event that I was at Saturday at the Minnesota History Center, they started to approach me, and get in my face, which usually they don't. And I had to literally leave out of there not knowing what's going to happen. And then later for them to put a tweet out saying, they're going to come after me and they're going to make it look like an accident. It's extremely troubling that usually I call them the paper pushers because they just like to make paper pushing. We're more concerned about the militia groups in the state of Minnesota who may actually, just like the group in Illinois that attacked the mosque, these are groups that actually could have a serious damage to our community. But now we're seeing the paper pushers threatening in this manner, and it's extremely troubling for us. Any last questions? And after the press conference, if you want to talk to some of the other folks here, the press. All right, thank you very much. Thanks for being here.
Very well done.
So calm.
One of the pages of the report, I can't remember the page. Okay. Side-by-side comparison of Center of the American Experiments and something they wrote. And immediately after that, they have an op-ed by Jeff Johnson.
Yeah, thanks for that. Thanks for start doing this survey.
Yeah, nice to see you too. Hello. Yeah, thanks for coming. I know, it's been a long summer, right? Oh, my trip's really good. Yeah, no, that.
You are a total rock star.
Just piles up and then the year starts, which is how I plan it. I'm sure like yours, like you're pretty like.
No, we don't. We probably want to do more. In fact, we have some of the lines in this stage.
Yeah. Are you going to be able to come on Friday?
It's not, and also we have
Okay,
Democrats
so-
who are involved in some stuff too.
Good.
Now they're not.
I know, how did you go wrong, right? Yeah. I saw those shirts, yeah.
This is part of
Right. Sure. And I was like, you would? Okay, yes.
Yes, I'm like, keeping your eyes on it.
Yeah, and if you can't get it, you drop my initial in there. Just text me and I'll give you the phone. It makes my life much easier. I bet it does. Thank you. Thank you for coming. I know it's all
We know as a community that we have seen a rise in road rage tactics. So that's a concern, and we want more carefully than a simple arson. No, this is the hospital. That we as a community fear has happened to our women, and in this scenario we want to ensure. And even just the fact that, I was threatened just last week, and they said they're going to make it look like an accident. So all this stuff is happening, and we want to make sure that Yep, and I think they just started their shift, so they were just having a break, and usually I think they had a pattern of just picking each other up, and when their break, go eat some food at the Fireman's Mark, which was around the kitty corner from where the pond was. And so it's possible that that's the behavior that they were doing, and that's the reaction that they were doing. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of rumors in our community around what was what was actually said today. So that's another piece of information that we'd love to know the full details of. The community is still on edge. Everything that happens to us, we're concerned about because of the rise in terrorism, and I don't doubt that the community is coming in.